He went from very sweet with well-thought-out dates to just demanding I take his loads, and called me filthy things along those lines.
It's always interesting and sad to see how the crappy ones flip a switch after they're done putting in the effort to woo you. Despicable. When I was in high school, I volunteered in the library to shelve books on my off period and lunch period. When I was a sophomore, a guy who was a senior started chatting me up. At first he would help me shelve, then he got more pushy about coming to have lunch with him, and I had a BF at the time. When the librarians put their foot down that he wasn't allowed to help, 'cause he was putting all the nonfiction in the wrong spots, he threatened to make it look like I was shelving wrong to get me fired from my favorite part of the school day. And he presented taking away the thing I loved so he could have access to me as romantic.
Gotta love the stalker vibes on that one, absolutely gross. When I was losing my virginity to him and crying because it hurt and he said, "Who cares, keep going."
The same thing happened to me and I just want you to know that nothing about that was your fault, and he was wrong and bad.
When I had a miscarriage and he couldn't be bothered to go to the hospital with me. When I found out there was no heartbeat, he came home hours later talking about his hunting plans.
OMG. Are you okay now?
When he keeps on saying he wants to rape me.
Road trip, ladies. We're going to the police to report that shit.
Made this on an alt account because he knows my main and IDK if he's still stalking it. Anyway, he called me his little Chinese fuck doll. We were not in a relationship, but it was so gross and, honestly, kinda out of left field because he was really kind and civil before that.
This scares me because a lot of kind and civil people are actually so weird when you get to know them.
When he forced me to take a taxi to the hospital alone, to watch my mother die, while I was 8 months pregnant with his child, and then sent me nasty messages while I sat by her bedside watching her take her final breaths. His reason? He believes I was screwing a male friend of mine. While I was heavily pregnant and visiting the hospital twice daily to watch my mother slowly die of hepatorenal syndrome. Probably the most inhumane thing anyone has ever done to me.
Absolutely awful. I'm sorry you had to endure that at such an emotional and difficult time. Did he turn out to be a cheater? 'Cause this shit sounds like classic projection to me.
He was seriously trying to choke me until I passed out. I never even gave the all clear to choke me at all. When I pried his arms away so I wouldn't fucking die, he said I was ruining the whole experience.
This happened to me, too. Thankfully on a much less aggressive level, but it shouldn't have happened, period. It triggered my PTSD.
When I was hemorrhaging massively, 10 days after the birth of our third child, and he wouldn't get off the phone, it was pre-mobile phone days, to call an ambulance. Eventually he ended his phone call but then refused to call for an ambulance or hold the baby so I could do it. I ended up crawling to where the phone was, clutching the baby to my chest, while he sat in the kitchen having a cigarette. I was in hospital a week, he dumped our other 2 children with his mother, got my friend over to clean up the blood mess in our house and then slept with her. I'm incredulous that I put up with him for 14 years.
That's horrible. Surely there are some laws against that? It feels like neglect, but I think that's just for parents with kids. I hope you got out of that situation and are doing better.
I asked him what his favorite animal was. He said women.
Literally, what the fuck?
When I was on my period and had the flu, so was out of commission in 2 holes, is how he phrased it. The third was not an option for me, so he got really angry about that. And then spent like 45 minutes complaining about not getting a hand job while I had a fever and was just miserable. Not once did he acknowledge that I was sick in a supportive way. Just that it ruined sex for us that week. Please say X. Please say X.
We were chatting in the days leading up to our first date. He absolutely refused to accept the fact that I wasn't going to have sex with him on the first date. Like he just kept talking about how great it was going to be.
Phew, love when they out themselves immediately.
When he, an ex, thank God, said he won't call me affectionate names, because I'm his private porn star. Like? What does it even mean?
It means sex objects don't deserve affection and being affectionate would break his fantasy. Gross.
The owners at my last job. I went to one of them crying after working a 14-hour shift because someone no-showed, after working 8 days in a row straight, and all he said was, "I expected you to have this more under control."
OMG, fuck them.
How are you doing now? You couldn't possibly have it more under control. What do you even expect when someone comes crying to you after working 14h? Leave if you haven't. Unbelievable. He felt the strings of my IUD when we were having sex and immediately demanded that I get it taken out.
The absolute, off the charts, you exist to pleasure me, attitudes of so many men is thoroughly disgusting. Then they constantly complain, why me can't get woman? Why woman prefer be single instead? Why her say, don't threaten me with a good time, when me tell her she will be cat, dog lady. He once told me he wished I was a robot so we could have sex still but I wouldn't have my emotions lol.
WTF?
An incel coworker being friendly, then shitting on all of us women to the less obvious gay, bi men he thought was safe. They turned around and warned all of us. He's a red pill misogynist and would say very alarming things. Love the restaurant industry. I still see him and he constantly complains to my old coworkers, friends, and regulars how he doesn't understand why I'm such a jerk to him now. I have a script in place if he tries to get me to serve him ever, and I've warned the new girls at my old place because we're all pretty cool.
Love when people get consequences for what they say, behind closed doors. When the doctor came in and told me that our baby was in distress and I needed to have an emergency C-section to save our lives, he huffed and puffed about it, saying he had been waiting 24 hours for me to give birth when they asked him if he wanted to put some scrubs on to come in, and he decided to go home because his mummy was going to take care of him whilst he played Xbox. Then after I had our baby he told me I wasn't allowed to invite my parents or sibling but traipsed his whole family in demanding to see and hold baby, including some random guy his mum was dating while I was recovering, still unwell from the birth and crying as baby was really sick in NICU. Then he told me I had birthed his baby so I needed to go get the baby from the NICU for him.
Good Lord. I am so sorry. I hope you and baby are safe and healthy now.
I asked him to please stop blasting his music in my car because I was driving through a literal tropical storm and needed to focus on the road, to pick his drunk ass up from a bar, no less. He responded by punching my windshield and shattering it. Then told me how dumb I was for not being able to drive in a tropical storm with his fucking hoodie and the blowfish destroying my eardrums. I really hope he's not doing well in life tbh.
What the fuck?
When he cheated while I was pregnant, after he begged for us to start a family.
This is a common story, as ***************************************** up as it is. They want someone to give birth to their children and continue their precious super special DNA. It's not, but have no respect for women.
When he only backed out after me telling him I have a boyfriend, instead of when I told him that I was not interested. He didn't respected me, he respected what I was to other male.
This happens way too often and it's infuriating.
I was taking some very intense short-term, 1-month, medication that absolutely wrecked me. I was vomiting multiple times a day, unable to keep anything down, unable to sleep more than a couple hours at a time, and still going into work the 2 to 3 days a week I was able to get out of bed. And still cleaning small things here and there when I had the energy. He tells me one day about 3 weeks in that I'm not doing enough around the house and the place is gross and I need to step it up. Never mind the fact that his friends that he moved in were absolute pigs and expected me to clean up after them all constantly. He also tells me that he's not happy with our bedroom life because I hadn't been putting out lately. Because I was vomiting constantly. After that talk it finally clicked that the weird feeling I'd had the few months prior was me realizing that in his eyes I was nothing more than a live-in made, sex toy.
God please say X, please say X.
My ex-husband told me out of the blue that he wanted a divorce and had been unhappy for 2 years but hiding it from me during that time. I was shocked and wanted to try and pursue marriage counseling and/or therapy at first. However, 2 weeks after the announcement he finally told me that he had been having a persistent delusion that I and others in his life weren't real people, and that I was a projection of his subconscious that existed to punish him for his perceived transgressions. He knew it was a delusion and was not willing to seek therapy because he didn't feel it was impacting his life. I beg to differ, but realized that you can't make someone want to get better or be in a relationship.
Oh damn. There was a thread somewhere where a guy's wife had that happen to them. She thought everybody was fake and were just projections trying to change her. I can't remember, but it's an actual disease and I think it can be treated with heavy therapy.
He is a lot older than me. Probably not the first thing that should have set alarm bells off. But I was saying I couldn't be with him anymore. I said something like, "Do you want me to stay with you and be miserable for the rest of my life?" And his response was, "Not for the rest of your life." Anyway, trying to get a divorce now, so worked out in the end.
It's infuriating to me that these FKRs see everyone else as supporting characters to their lives. We don't exist in their minds as whole people. How does this happen? Is it innate or how they're raised? I would assume it's how they're raised, but OMG, how are there so many of them like this?
Over dinner a few weeks ago, my stepdad basically told me to my actual face that the most valuable thing about me is my ability to bear children. He stated it like it was simple fact. I had just said I don't like kids and am horrified at the prospect of becoming pregnant. Not to toot my own horn, but I'm a pretty brilliant molecular biology student. I intend to go into life-saving research. I think that's the most valuable thing about me. Anyway, I just gestured at my younger brother, a brilliant physics student, and said, "Cool, so he's just a spunk bank, right?" My stepdad got offended that I would talk about him that way. Lol.
Sorry you had to deal with that crap.